Dr. Nardi here, and in this lecture we're going to talk about aggression, and we can simply define aggression as a behavior that is intended to harm or control another. Now, there are different types of aggression, and to be perfectly honest here, most researchers cannot agree on the definitions of aggression. However, we will briefly talk about a few. There is predatory aggression that occurs when an animal kills or attacks another animal or prey, or when a human makes a premeditated, unprovoked attack on another individual. And think about predatory aggression as cold and emotionless, where affect aggression is characterized by impulsiveness and emotional arousal. And we can kind of define aggression in a couple different ways. We have proactive aggression or instrumental aggression. It's unprovoked and emotionless, and it's intended to bring about some gain for the aggressor. For example, if you see robberies of individuals, that's you would argue that's a proactive type of aggression. You'll see this a lot, not always, with people who are diagnosed with psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder. And then we have reactive or impulsive aggression. This occurs in response to a threat, real or imagined, and it's characterized by heightened emotionality. We can also talk about the biological origins of aggression. And as you might suspect by now, there are different parts of the brain, and it's an interplay of the brain network of structures that kind of leads to aggressive behavior. And we can think about the amygdala, various parts of the prefrontal cortex, and the hypothalamus. However, when emotion is involved, in the case with provocation, the insula and the ACC are recruited into action as well. Hormones also play a role in aggression. And not only do we have those brain structures, but we also have various hormones that play a role. The one that always usually comes up is testosterone, and it's largely because men are typically more violent than women when we're talking about physical aggression. But you should note that testosterone not only plays a role in male aggression, but it also plays a role in female aggression as well. Also note that serotonin and cortisol are equally as important as counters to testosterone. So the link between testosterone and aggression has been established in both animals and humans. So we know that various levels of testosterone had varying effects on behavior. We noticed that the effects of elevated testosterone lead to poor emotional regulation. This poor emotional regulation seems to be a result of a relationship between the OFC and the amygdala. And then if you add in increased motivation, decreased fearfulness, reduced trust, and an increased reward sensitivity and risk-taking due to the dopamine activity in the ventral stratum and the nucleus accumbens, then you have an individual who is primed for aggressive action. But also note that while there is relationships between testosterone and aggression, it varies from study to study, and in some studies it's actually kind of quite weak. And in reality, testosterone itself is not enough. And it's the interaction between testosterone and the environment. Serotonin also plays a role in aggression through the effects of through its impact on the prefrontal cortex. Interestingly enough, low levels of serotonin have been associated with more impulsive behavior because serotonin plays a role in inhibition in the prefrontal cortex. And if you have lower levels of serotonin, this seems to encourage aggressive behavior by reducing the connectivity of the prefrontal cortex with the amygdala. And remember that prefrontal cortex is that decision-making part of your brain. Interestingly enough, if you give somebody antidepressants that block the reuptake of serotonin at the synapses, then you have this increased serotonin levels and you have reduced aggressive behavior. Serotonin is not the only neurotransmitters we look at. We should also look at cortisol. Cortisol also inhibits aggression. We noticed that, for example, in male prisoners with low levels of cortisol had high levels of aggression and were more likely to be diagnosed a psychopath, meaning their aggression was calculating and unemotional, just in layman's terms. Numerous studies have linked aggression to a combination of high testosterone and low cortisol levels. This is found in both males and females. We also want to talk about the role of genetics, and research, at least about that includes 40 twin studies, concluded that about 50% of variability in aggression, or I should say aggressive behavior, can be accounted for by your genes. So we can identify these genes when we're studying aggressive behaviors. Even though you should note that there's a large number of genes involved, and there's actually different genes involved with different stages of life and aggression. We can also look at the role of genetics, and we noticed, at least according to these 40 twin studies, that 50% of the variability in aggression or aggressive behavior can be accounted for by your genes. And most of the genes that have been identified so far have functions in relation to serotonin and dopamine transmission. But also note that the genes and your environment do not operate in isolation, but they interact with each other. And we often refer to this as epigenetics, how the environment influences your genes, but also how your genes influence your environment. And at the end of the day, aggression is a very complex interaction between your biology and your environment.